Imagine standing alone on an endless African plain nearly 2 million years ago. The midday sun is relentless. Heat shimmers above the dry grass, and every step kicks up fine dust. Around you, lions rest in the shade, antelopes dart across the horizon, and troops of baboons keep to the trees. In this harsh world, nearly every mammal wears the same kind of armor, a thick coat of fur. It shields them from the sun, cushions them against cold nights, and helps protect their skin from insects and scratches. But one species is beginning to do something extraordinary. Its body is changing in a way that seems almost impossible. Instead of growing a thicker coat to survive the wild, it is slowly losing. At first glance, this appears to be one of evolution's greatest mistakes. Why would nature strip away the very thing that protects mammals? Without fur, skin burns more easily under the sun, loses warmth quickly after sunset, and becomes vulnerable to cuts, parasites, and weather. Every instinct tells us that losing fur should have made our ancestors weaker. Yet this strange transformation would become one of the most important turning points in human history. Long before the first shirt was stitched, long before woven cloth covered the body, and even before the first village was built, evolution had already set humanity on a path that would eventually lead to clothing. But the story doesn't begin with fabric. It begins with sweat. Millions of years ago, early human ancestors lived in forests where shade offered natural protection. As Earth's climate shifted, forests gradually gave way to open grasslands across much of Africa. Food became scattered over greater distances, forcing our ancestors to travel farther each day. Walking upright, a trait that had already begun evolving, suddenly became even more useful. Standing on two legs reduced direct exposure to the overhead sun and allowed individuals to cover long distances more efficiently. Among these early travelers was Homo erectus, a species that looked strikingly different from earlier human relatives. Taller, with longer legs, and a body built for endurance, Homo erectus could roam landscapes that would exhaust many other animals. But endurance came with a challenge: overheating. Most mammals cool themselves by panting. Dogs hang out their tongues. Many large animals seek shade during the hottest hours of the day. Humans, however, evolved a different strategy. Our skin became packed with millions of eccrine sweat glands, capable of producing large amounts of sweat. As sweat evaporates, it carries heat away from the body, acting like a natural cooling system. This adaptation gave humans a remarkable advantage. Instead of sprinting for a few seconds like a cheetah, our ancestors could keep moving for hours. They could track injured animals across vast distances under the blazing sun, a hunting method known today as persistence hunting. While faster animals eventually overheated and stopped, determined human hunters could continue walking until their prey became exhausted. But this cooling system worked best only if sweat could evaporate freely. Dense body hair traps moisture, reducing evaporation and making cooling less efficient. Over countless generations, natural selection favored individuals with less body hair, allowing sweat to do its job more effectively. Gradually, the thick fur covering our ancestors diminished. Ironically, by becoming one of Earth's least hairy mammals, humans also became one of its greatest endurance athletes. Yet every evolutionary advantage comes with a cost. As the sun set over the African savanna, temperatures dropped rapidly. Without thick fur, cool nights became uncomfortable. Skin was exposed to thorny vegetation, biting insects, and ultraviolet radiation. The very adaptation that helped humans conquer the heat left them increasingly vulnerable under different conditions. Scientists believe several other forces may also have encouraged the loss of body hair. Thick fur can provide an ideal habitat for parasites such as ticks, fleas, and lice. Reducing body hair may have made it harder for these pests to thrive, lowering the risk of disease. Some researchers have also suggested that sexual selection played a role, with less hairy individuals perhaps being perceived as healthier or more attractive by potential mates. While no single explanation answers every question, these ideas paint a picture of evolution solving one problem while creating another, and that new problem would only grow larger. For hundreds of thousands of years, early humans remained mostly within warmer regions where the climate was relatively forgiving. But Earth itself was changing. Powerful natural cycles began reshaping the planet. Ice sheets advanced and retreated. Rainfall patterns shifted. Grasslands expanded. Forests shrank. And entirely new environments appeared. Driven by curiosity, competition, and the search for food, human populations slowly began venturing beyond the warmth of Africa. Each new journey pushed them into unfamiliar landscapes where winter could be deadly. Their greatest evolutionary advantage was becoming their greatest weakness. How could a nearly hairless species survive in lands where even heavily furred animals struggled? The answer would not come from biology alone. It would come from one of the first technologies ever invented by our species. A technology so simple that almost no trace of it survives today, yet so powerful that it helped humans spread across the entire planet. And its story begins beside the glow of an ancient fire. The fire crackles softly as darkness swallows the landscape. Beyond its warm circle of light, unseen predators move through the night. A cold wind sweeps across the open plain, carrying with it a reminder that the world is changing. For generations, early humans had relied on their bodies to survive. Now, for the first time, their bodies alone were no longer enough. Fire was one of humanity's greatest inventions, or more accurately, one of its greatest discoveries. By learning to control it, our ancestors transformed almost every aspect of life. It provided warmth during freezing nights, frightened away dangerous predators, made food easier to digest, and extended the day long after sunset. But fire had one major limitation. It stayed where it was built. A hunter tracking animals across snowy valleys couldn't carry an entire campfire on his back. A family migrating through icy mountain passes couldn't stop every few hundred meters just to stay warm. As humans ventured farther into colder regions, they needed something portable, something they could take wherever they went. They needed a second skin. No one knows exactly who first looked at an animal hide and imagined wearing it. There was no inventor whose name history recorded. No dramatic moment where clothing suddenly appeared. Instead, it was likely a gradual process of experimentation, observation, and necessity. Imagine a successful hunt. After removing meat for food, hunters are left with the animal's hide. At first, it may simply be used as a blanket while sleeping. Later, someone wraps it around their shoulders during a cold journey. Another person discovers that tying it with strips of leather keeps it from slipping off. Over countless generations, these simple ideas slowly evolve into intentional garments. This wasn't fashion. It was survival. Unlike fur that grows naturally, animal hides required work. Fresh skins decay quickly. Left untreated, they become stiff, brittle, and foul-smelling. Early humans had to learn how to scrape away fat, stretch hides, dry them, and eventually tan them using natural materials like animal brains, smoke, or plant tannins. These techniques transformed raw skin into flexible leather that could last much longer. Archaeologists rarely find these ancient garments because leather, bark, and plant fibers decompose rapidly. After tens of thousands of years, almost nothing remains. So how do scientists know clothing existed at all? The answer lies in the tools left behind. Across archaeological sites, researchers have uncovered stone scrapers with microscopic wear patterns showing repeated hide processing. These weren't ordinary cutting tools. Under powerful microscopes, their edges reveal tiny polish marks and scratches created by scraping animal skins over and over again. Such evidence suggests hide preparation became an important part of daily life long before preserved clothing could survive in the archaeological record. As technology advanced, so did clothing. Eventually, humans began shaping garments instead of merely wrapping themselves in hides. Bone awls helped punch holes through leather. Later, eyed bone needles allowed hides to be stitched together into fitted clothing. Sleeves, leggings, boots, and carefully tailored garments trapped warm air much more effectively than loose coverings. This innovation dramatically expanded the environments humans could survive. Now, they could remain active even in freezing temperatures. But one of the most remarkable clues about clothing doesn't come from stone tools or ancient campsites. It comes from an unlikely source: lice. At first, it sounds almost ridiculous that tiny parasites could solve one of archaeology's biggest mysteries. Yet genetics has turned lice into unexpected historians. Humans host two closely related parasites: head lice and clothing lice. Head lice spend their entire lives among hair on the scalp. Clothing lice, however, live almost entirely inside garments, crawling onto human skin only to feed before returning to the folds of fabric or hides. Without clothing, clothing lice cannot survive. By comparing the DNA of these two parasites, scientists estimate that clothing lice diverged from head lice roughly 170,000 years ago. While different studies produce slightly different estimates, the evidence strongly suggests that by this period, humans were wearing clothing regularly enough for an entirely new species of parasite to evolve alongside us. In other words, our clothes became a habitat. It's a remarkable example of how evolution records history in unexpected places. Even when the garments themselves disappeared, the organisms that depended on them carried clues across thousands of generations. Meanwhile, humans weren't the only intelligent people living on Earth. Across Europe and Western Asia, another species had already adapted to life in cold environments: the Neanderthals. For decades, scientists debated whether Neanderthals wore sophisticated clothing. Archaeological evidence shows they processed enormous numbers of animal hides, and their muscular bodies were well suited to Ice Age climates. However, unlike later Homo sapiens, evidence for finely tailored garments remains limited. Many researchers think Neanderthals probably relied on draped hides, capes, or simple coverings rather than tightly stitched clothing. Even so, these garments may have been enough to survive winters that would quickly kill an unprotected human. Then, around 70,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began expanding across Eurasia in greater numbers. Armed with increasingly advanced tools, better planning, and more sophisticated clothing, they entered environments once thought nearly impossible for a tropical species to inhabit. Frozen tundras, snow-covered forests, high mountain ranges. The invention of clothing had quietly changed humanity's destiny. It wasn't merely keeping people warm anymore. It was allowing an African species to become a global one. In many ways, cloth helped weave the ancient world together. At the same time, clothing became one of the clearest expressions of culture. Different environments produced different designs. Arctic communities perfected insulated garments from animal skins and fur. Desert cultures developed loose robes that protected against both intense sunlight and blowing sand. Tropical societies favored lightweight fabrics that allowed heat to escape. Every region adapted the same basic idea to its own landscape. Nature shaped clothing. Clothing, in turn, shaped culture.